Mahatma Gandhi said that truth will never damage a cause that is just. Truth is what we have in the animal rights movement, like any other social justice movement. And truth is what will eventually prevail as more and more people are made aware of the great injustices playing out behind closed doors. Today I want to share a little of my truth, as someone who is indisputably plagued with an intimate awareness of those injustices. For anyone who missed the introductory video, I'm Dr. Alice Brough, a veterinary surgeon who spent 4 years up until last year working in the pig industry. My experience of that led me to become vegan about 3 years ago, and to then essentially discard the career that I've been actively driving towards for over 13 years of my life in favour of animal rights activism. One of the comments that came up on that intro video was, "I'm glad she's here doing this, but why even be a pig vet in the first place?" I think the first thing to understand before I launch in is that I wasn't vegan when I started. In fact, I was one of these ignorant people who thought vegetarians were stupid. I'm from a farming background and I was a staunch supporter of great British animal agriculture, and I even had the bumper stickers. But I've now taken the evidence that was in front of me to make an informed decision to no longer support those industries. And that evidence was so disturbing that not only do I no longer support them, I'm actively working against them. Another thing I ought to explain is why I went into pigs in the first place. It's not a popular choice. There's only about 30 to 40 pig-only vets in the UK. But right from my first experience on a pig farm, age 15, I'd already clocked that many of the practices were deeply unacceptable. Naively, I thought I might actually be able to do something about that. So on that first day on a large, pretty decent indoor pig farm, I was being shown around the farrowing house, and we came up to a sow in a crate with a litter of piglets, and one of her piglets was a little smaller and weaker than the others. I sort of innocently asked, do we normally bottle feed the little ones? And the stock person kind of laughed at me and said, now we'll knock that one. And we've all seen it. He proceeded to pick up that little girl by her back legs, swing her over his head and smash her skull on the concrete. I kind of crumpled down in shock onto the side of the farrowing crate, not quite able to process what I was seeing. I went on to work on that farm for about 6 months when I was 18, and that became something I was doing myself multiple times a day. Up until the day that I left the industry, 10 years later, I was still smashing babies onto concrete floors. In fact, I was training people in how to do that as the industry standard, acceptable on Red Tractor, RSPCA, organic assured farms. And that wasn't anywhere near the worst thing that I was having to do or witness. Another common question I get is, what were you thinking? Staying in that industry for 3 years after you'd already decided it was all too awful for you to support with your own consumer choices. I kind of felt like I couldn't leave them, and I felt almost obliged to try and work my way up to a position where I was able to influence welfare standards. Clearly, as I'm now sat here addressing a virtual animal rights march, that was a ridiculous notion. It became apparent that whatever I said and did hadn't the blindest bit of impact on overall farming standards. And actually, pointing out to someone that the way in which they were keeping their animals was not acceptable had the exact opposite effect. In many instances, I was banned from farms or replaced by another vet. So after 4 years, I felt that I'd seen enough, and the thousands of pigs that I'd driven a screwdriver into the brain of was quite enough for me, and perhaps I'd have more luck exerting external pressure. So 1 year on, I'm still experiencing PTSD, and I do apologise, those are the gory details over with for today. I really struggle in selecting content for talks because there's so much, and really a lot of it is quite horrible. But today is not the day. So a few days ago, I was made privy to a friend's family group chat dispute. My friend is vegan, his family are not. And the usual generic kind of rehearsed excuses ensued. And I wasn't allowed to respond on his behalf, so I thought, why not put some of this into a speech? And most of you won't have seen me talk before, so I thought what I'd do today, for an overall look at the carefully painted picture of animal agriculture versus the reality, is provide 3 key truths from a professional standpoint. And I see it so often in activist interviews, people saying, you don't know what you're talking about, go and speak to the farmer. Actually, I do know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's important to remember I have nothing to gain, other than in a piece, by telling the truth, and plenty to lose. To be honest, I've already lost plenty and faced extreme challenges in making that decision. And of course, it was 100% worth it. Truth number 1, the one bad egg excuse for animal cruelty is a fallacy. What we see increasingly plastered all over the news in farm exposés represents the majority rather than the minority. It's the standard practice which is unpalatable, not the isolated incident. Evidenced by the fact that most farms that are exposed continue to farm animals. Very few of them are actually in breach of any laws. Some of my favourite comments from people within the industry who know very well that this is an accurate reflection are things like, oh, the footage hasn't been verified, or perhaps it's been doctored. We're a grassroots social justice movement, not a Hollywood team of CGI experts. Like, I don't know how they think any of this is being falsified. Oh, it's filmed in the dark. Yeah. The buildings are dark, filthy, miserable prisons. What's your point? Understand that when you're shown adverts or industry-funded footage, that's been set up. And in fact, I've assisted in setting farms up for adverts. It's glamorised to sell you a product. But when you see covert footage, that's what the farms look like day in, day out when they don't think they're being filmed. As a pig vet, I was routinely inspecting about 95% of my clients' farms every 3 months on the Red Tractor scheme. And even at these pre-arranged visits, what I would often find would leave me getting in a car at the end of that visit and having to scream my way home. So for the 4 days that they know a vet's coming to inspect them, it was already horrifying enough. And as we can see from covert footage, it doesn't miraculously get better when they think no one's watching. I spent 6 months working with Viva, and I can say that their footage is all representative, honest, and not a single moment of it shocked me, because the atrocities shown are so commonplace. Truth number 2, animal welfare. And let's think of welfare as, would you want that done to you? Animal welfare in the UK is quite simply appalling. Pointing out that it's so much worse abroad, which undoubtedly it is, doesn't excuse what we're doing here. And I'd like to signpost at this point to Land of Hope and Glory, which is available to watch for free online. Millions of pounds are spent every year on marketing to conceal the reality. Exponentially more than is spent on actually improving the conditions. There's a constant message of back British. It's better than Europe, better than the US, Asia. Being better than doesn't equate to being good. And we're really hammered with this image of green and pleasant lands and small local family farms. And that's just not even physically possible. Our diets are becoming ever more Americanized, and naturally, our agriculture has to keep up. Intensive, industrial, inhumane is the norm. But it's not even as if the small family farms are any better. If they were, perhaps I'd still be eating meat. Obviously, if it weren't for the catastrophic environmental and human health impacts of that, or the fact that they have to be gassed or electrocuted before I can eat them. But no, some of the worst concoctions of disease and welfare issues I've ever seen have been on small family farms with the little farm shop attached. Because if they're not on an assurance scheme, nobody really checks. They're not required to have veterinary input for the appropriate species of animal, and the APHA is supposed to get round every 3 years to inspect them, but even that doesn't happen. Truth number 3. Ethical farming, and indeed humane slaughter, is a myth. There's no right way to do the wrong thing. And assurance schemes and comparative welfare terms are simply a way for a profit-driven industry to ensure that their consumer feels good about paying for the chopped up body parts and secretions of tortured animals. Don't get me wrong, there is a necessity at the moment for some sort of regulation, otherwise it would be even worse. But certainly there is no tangible effort to actually improve the lives of animals, only to create a premium on a product. Earlier in the year, I appeared on BBC's Country File to make a few very short comments on pig welfare standards and the Red Tractor scheme. Fairly telling feedback on this. We had 3 rancid articles written in farming publications. Several industry bodies felt the need to release official statements, despite declining an opportunity to appear on the show to give the balance that they so violently complained about afterwards. And several people, of course, felt the need to head to Twitter and Facebook to make comments, mostly on how much I needed a steak. Though I wasn't sure from the dubious spelling whether they meant the meat or to be burnt at the stake. But one example I wanted to draw from that was from Minette Batters, president of the NFU, who described the item as an abhorrent piece, not reflective of British farming or animal welfare standards. I'd love to know how many pig farms Minette's actually been on, compared to the several hundred that I have, and whether she's qualified actually to make assessments on the health and welfare of pigs, or whether she's just blindly supporting the industry as a whole so that she can continue to slaughter cows at home without scrutiny, and of course to maintain her position at the National Farmers Union. Most farmers don't actually go on many other people's farms because of the potentially disastrous biosecurity implications. I wanted to bring this up because when you're receiving information from people within an industry desperate to maintain your custom in order to financially support themselves, it's extremely important to apply some objectivity. These people have been grafting for a long time on the scripted statements to be seen as a reputable source. And they have a lot of money to throw at what is essentially brainwashing. And what this means for us is that we must never allow ourselves to be drowned out by the flashy advertising and the paid experts. And the more vegans being active, the louder we are. They can whine all they like on Twitter, but there's no solid evidence they can provide to dispute the readily available evidence of the systematic oppression of intelligent, emotionally complex individuals. I've now been speaking publicly for over a year, and if I were to have said anything factually incorrect during that time, I'm sure I would have been slapped with a lawsuit. The pig industry is worth £8.6 billion. I'm worth approximately £8.60. As it is, I've actually been contacted by the CEO of Red Tractor, welcoming constructive feedback on improving the scheme. I've been invited by the Pig Veterinary Society to present a welfare session at their next conference. Not because I have any different or more knowledge than anyone else, but because I don't have a job, clients or income to lose in saying it how it is. And I've received messages of support from farmers and from people whose experience in the industry dwarfs my own. We are getting there, but we mustn't take our foot off the gas. I did toy momentarily with the idea of feeding back to Red Tractor. The resistance to change is so overarching that the minute and infrequent changes to welfare standards are carefully calculated to maximise trust in a brand. And I sure as hell wasn't going to have my name used in that agenda. I went vegan because there's literally no good option with animal product. Animal agriculture, of course, is one of the leading causes of the climate emergency, which is not difficult to understand if you've ever spent more than 5 minutes in a finisher pig shed. You and the pigs are coughing and spluttering, your eyes red and streaming, and your lungs feel as though they'll never quite recover from the insult inflicted upon them by the ammonia and the nitrous oxide. A greenhouse gas with 296 times the potency of carbon dioxide, which remains in the atmosphere for over 100 years. We do not have 100 years. To bring it back to my friend's family dispute, the knee-jerk reaction to being forced to evaluate your own moral standing is unmistakable. And another one of the often regurgitated lines is, oh, what about the poor farmers just trying to make money? You wouldn't have sympathy for a drug dealer who had to change profession. You wouldn't worry about the slave traders or the human traffickers. So why do you care about someone who simply has to change their product line from one of cruelty and pollution to one that's plant-based and sustainable? Very little has changed for pigs in the 13 years that I was involved in that industry. Every time some horrid little detail is brought to light, they find a way to defend it, dispute it, and brush it under the rug. No more. We are going to win this fight. We have to, really, to prevent the collapse of our planet as we know it. But it will take a prolonged and concerted effort from everyone who is able. I want to see every single vegan at next year's Animal Rights March. I want to see everyone coming together on the same side as a community mobilising in strategic action. And strategic is a key word for me. Don't just do things for the sake of it. Always think, why am I doing this? What effect am I hoping to have? And how can I maximise that effect? We will not win through being apologetic. No other social justice movement behaves in this way. And we will not win by dividing in the way that the animal exploitation industries are hoping that we will. Put egos aside, always be authentic, and seek factual truth from reputable sources. Treat this movement like a tribe in which everyone has their vital role to play. I'm talking the researchers, the politicians, the artists, the influencers, the investigators, the photographers, the vets. Vets, for goodness sake, step up to the oath that you swore on entry to the profession and lead from the front in protecting animals. And with that, I'd like to end as I began, with a quote. This one is from Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel. There may be times when we're powerless to prevent injustices, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest. Consider this. What if society had not been made aware of the concentration camps and the gas chambers? Society is becoming increasingly aware of the reality of animal agriculture. But the difference is somebody's profiting from it, so money is being thrown at shielding the public. Vegans, if you're aware of what's happening, please share your truth in whatever way you feel is accessible to you. Be creative, be brave. It is literally a matter of life or death, not only for the exploited individuals, but for the wildlife, the planet we inhabit, and for humankind. Meat eaters, pescatarians, vegetarians, consider how you might feel looking back in 10, 20, 30 years' time, knowing that you were willfully paying for sentient beings to be imprisoned in what are essentially concentration camps, and murdered in what are in actual fact gas chambers, and worse, by the billions every week. Nobody's asking you to go to war. Nobody's asking you to do anything which would be detrimental to you or others. In fact, making a simple adjustment to your weekly shop will significantly benefit you. Please take this simple step to align your actions with your morals, and do not delay. This really was a minute snapshot of what I want to share, and I got quite fired up in writing this, so I want to follow up with some further videos on more specific issues and some probably quite fun debunking exercises. Please remember to support each other. It is incredibly emotionally and mentally draining holding the burden of this truth. But we're in it, and the only way is through. So just make sure you're getting enough love, connection, fun in between to be sustainable. Thank you to anyone who made it this far. I really hope you're enjoying the day and feeling inspired by all the wonderful speakers to get active and share your truth. Thank you.